Welcome back. In our previous video, we were working on learning how to do some basic drawing of a 2D object in AutoCAD, in this case the key plate, which you see in front of you. And today we'll be continuing on working on replicating the example here with some center marks and some dimensions and maybe setting it up on a piece of paper. We'll see how long we go today. So let's start with center lines or center marks. So circles have center marks, fillets have center marks, radiuses might have center marks, and then we have center lines. And this drawing has kind of a combination of those things going on, mostly center marks and circles, and we're also being shown dimensions referencing those center marks. So in order to get started, let's go into AutoCAD and let's first select a center line. So everything that we're going to create now, we want to be on the center layer. And if we grab a line real quick and came in here to draw a line, you can see that it shows up as a center line. And again, that is a line with a long and short dash. And the size of those items can vary slightly depending upon some settings in the software. So most of the time, the default settings that have been created in the template file that we're using should work out just fine for you. However, on this particular object, there is a command that is quite beneficial. All right, and under annotation, we have an option here. So under annotate, we have an option here. And that option is for a center mark. So if I go into the center mark, all I need to do is select the center of an arc or a circle, and it will place a center mark in for me. And you can see here, dependent upon which center mark or which object I choose, I will get the ability to have varying sizes of those center marks. So let me undo a bit, or cancel out of here, and now let's undo. And let's start that over. So I'm going to use a center mark in the big circle. That would be a good place to start. Outside of that, I'm going to place one in the partial circles here. And then I'm going to select and place them in the small circles around the outside. Now, the reason for doing that is a couple things. Number one, there are some center marks here that are constant, or I should say, vertically and horizontally aligned. When I did the center mark on the filleted item, it was very large in a portion of the drawing that I don't want it to be very large. So one of the things we haven't talked about previously is we should be able to select these lines, or any line for that matter, and you're going to get some grips. So if everything's going to work out great for me here, I should be able to left click and drag out. In this case, I'm just kind of eyeballing the distance, sections of that center mark, so they extend a little bit farther than where the default setting might go. So again, I'm going to kind of eyeball these and try to make them similar. I'm going to work my way around doing that for all 4 center marks. It is possible, if you're watching this, that you might be zoomed in a whole lot, and maybe you can see these object snaps might get in the way, and if they do, F11 turns object snap on and off, but I'm just going to kind of eyeball these and try to make them similar. Okay. Again, technical drawing and eyeballing isn't the greatest situation, and there are some ways around that, and I'll to be a little bit more accurate, and let me show you that. So once I have this drug out, what I can do is maybe during the process I'd have stopped right there on the intersection of this line and the end point of this line. And if I wanted to be very accurate with how far out that particular line is, what I can do is once it's kind of trimmed right here, I can left click on this and drag this out, and I should be able to take a look at the distance here, right? So I'm being given a distance here, and maybe I want this to be at 0.75. And now that's exactly 3/4 of an inch from the center, and I can make all of these the same distance outside the object. And traditionally, in technical drawing, you want to be highly accurate like that. Okay? Again, show you a number of different techniques. This is a beginning drawing. We will worry about some details as we progress. Now, the next thing is in our example, we see that the center marks for those circles vertically seem to be all kind of the same, except there's maybe a crosshair in the center of each circle. Well, we have the crosshair, but we don't have consistent lines. And again, we can kind of tweak this by simply selecting one of these. Selecting one of these and extending them. Now, this is where AutoCAD will get a little picky. Let me undo there. Okay, so let's select that item again. And so if I grab the arrow and drag this out, okay, maybe to that endpoint, we're left with no gap. However, if I come up to this side and I grab this square grip and bring that up to this other option, on the other side, on the bottom, it gave us an option. So sometimes there's a thing called line type scale that will get in our way. And one of the other things, again, a lot of stuff that I'm trying to share, one of the things is sometimes when you zoom in and you zoom out, sometimes circles don't look like circles, or sometimes the dash size changes. So a good command to see if everything's looking correct is to type in regen. It's like regenerate. Okay, so if I type in regen and those two items still look okay, I'm going to go with it. I'm going to assume that what I'm seeing on my screen here is going to be accurate. And again, choosing kind of which lines to extend. Sometimes we might try one or the other. So on that side, I extended the center mark. This side, I'm going to extend the small circle center mark. And that doesn't appear to have any change in the appearance of this drawing. Okay, so I'm going to, again, work my way around and make all of these circles appear the same. So we've gone through the process of putting in some center marks. If we, again, look at our example, it does appear that the center mark in a large circle is a little bit larger, but we do have a dimension coming off of that. So I'm going to leave the center mark in our in our circle alone until we put in some dimensions. All right. So now that we're going to work on some dimensions, I'm going to do Control S and do a save. And now I'm going to come down to a dimension, DIM. Okay, this will be a dark blue, maybe a little hard to see on your screen. Hopefully the contrast or brightness is turned up. So I will not replicate exactly the dimensions we have here, but I will show you how to do some basic circle dimensions, leader dimensions, and linear dimensions. And maybe show you another option for circle or radius dimensions. And there are pros and cons to some of the default settings in the software. So let's start with a basic dimension. So AutoCAD's got this automatic dimension. I generally don't like it, but you might. We also have the option of being a little bit more specific with the type of dimension that we are looking to place. And I'm going to start with a linear dimension. All right. So for instance, I probably need to know the distance between the center of this large circle and the circles on the outside. And you can see here by clicking on the endpoints of those center marks, I'm going to get a dimension here. Okay, and another rule of thumb with technical drawing is the spacing that a line is away from the object. This would be too close. This would be way too far for our first layer. So kind of rule of thumb, something that might look like that, where the space that the arrow of our dimension is about even with what's called the dimension extension line, might be a good place to start. And the first one on a horizontal or vertical plane is kind of the most important because we want everything to line up real nice with one another. All right, so let me try another one of those. I'm going to linear dimension, and this time I'm going to do dimension over the centers here like we saw in the example. And again, I don't have anything controlling the distance of this dimension away from the previous dimension. And so again, I'm kind of looking to, I don't want to say eyeball it, but make it look similar to the distance from the first dimension, but closer. And again, once we have that dimension in, we can select it and we can move parts of the dimensions so we follow proper dimensioning rules. All right, so that's a linear dimension, and we've got a couple more over here vertically, and we would want the spacing on those vertical dimensions to be about the same as the horizontal dimensions. All right, maybe we'll do one of these interior dimensions, but if you kind of replicate what we see here, you should be pretty good to go, again, with a few exceptions, which I'll show you. All right, so next let's try a fillet dimension or a radius dimension. So let's go up here and get radius. Okay, so let's go down here to this fillet and we're going to select radius. And in this case, that radius, I kind of like the way that looks. And let's see what it looks like when we left click to place it. Okay, so I can change the angle, but I'm going to left click to place that radius. I should be able to come in here and move the location of the text a little bit. So again, we're not looking to have it kind of be in the middle of a line like we would. Oh, I gotta turn off my object snap. My object snap is off. That's my. There we go. Okay, we don't want to have a piece of text being cut into by a line. Makes it hard to read. Okay, so again, we can space things out to make them clearer, and that's kind of devil's in the details if you've heard that before. All right, and now we've got a fillet radius there, or a radius dimension. Let's try another one with a diameter, see what that looks like. Let's go up here to the big circle. Let's do a diameter here. Okay, so you can see this one's got some odd extension lines depending upon what I do, and that's not looking half bad. So I'm going to left click to place that. And again, I'm going to select and move, and turn off ortho here, select and move the location of my text. And that's worked out okay as well. Every once in a while, when AutoCAD does dimensions, it's going to try to put in its own center mark. And I generally like to stay away from those because we don't want center marks on top of center marks. Another way that you can do a dimension on a circle or a radius is with what's called a leader dimension. Okay, now as far as leaders, you see that there's a number of options. I generally like to type in leader, and you can see again there's a number of leader options, and I like this specific leader because of the way it operates. And so I want to do a leader dimension on these 4 circles, kind of like we see in our example. We've got this leader dimension. It comes out. It's pointing at the center of the circle, comes out on an angle. Then we have a short horizontal section, and then we have information. So what I like to do is I like to start in the middle of the circle or the fillet, and we turn on tracking. And I'm going to start in the middle, and my ortho's off. I need to make sure that I'm far enough out. You see this? The arrow's not there if I'm too close. I want to make sure the arrow shows up, and I'm going to drag this out at an angle. And I'm going to come out about like that. I'm going to left click to place that. And then I'm going to turn ortho on, and I'm going to do a short horizontal line like so. And then I'm kind of done with my leader, so I'm going to hit enter. And I should then go into annotation or text. And this is where the example here is pretty old, at least to my knowledge. What we want to change this documentation into is a statement that might say 4 holes with a particular diameter. So let me show you how that looks, because right now we've got everything in whole numbers and decimals, not fractions. So while we're up here, what I'm going to do for my text is I'm going to do 4, and then if you haven't, turn on your caps lock, so everything's uppercase, 4x, so that's 4 times, and then I'm going to type in a series of key commands, %, %D. I think it's D. We'll find out. Maybe it's C. I could be confused. %D, and that's going to give me a diameter symbol, which is like a circle. Actually, I think it's %C. And it's going to give me a circle with a slash through it, which is a diameter symbol. And then I'm going to type in the decimal size of my circle. Hit enter once, hit enter again, and there is my leader dimension. And if I was to be critical of myself, I would say it's a little far away from the object. Okay, and again, sometimes moving these and rearranging them can be kind of problematic. Sometimes it's easier just to start over. However, if I wanted to adjust the text, I should be able to come in here, and let's say I wanted to put a dash in there instead, and I can adjust the text pretty easily. But changing the leader angle and whatnot is sometimes a little problematic. The last thing that I want to do is I actually want this arrow to point touching the outside edge of the circle, but heading towards its center. And you can see here by selecting where the arrow started, I can come out to the intersection point created by the initial leader, and I can left click there, and very quickly I now have an arrow that's pointing directly at the center and touching the exact outside edge of the circle where that line intersected it. All right, so a leader dimension. And let's see. Oh, I was going to show you an interior dimension. So one of these 3/4 or the 3/8. So let's do that. Again, those aren't too different. We're going to go up to a linear dimension. And let's say I wanted to give the one here for the depth this detail. Again, I'm just going to select 2 endpoints for my dimension. And the big thing here is you don't want it super long like this. You also want to try to avoid things being in tight like this. I generally try to avoid lines or dimensions crossing whenever possible. So this one's kind of a balancing act between somewhere in here, which is where my brain wants to put it, and having it way out here where that arrow line doesn't cross the circle. And I'm going to go with that for now. All right, so again, not too big of a deal. As far as putting it in, it's not much different than doing that exterior linear dimension on the outside. So again, we do need to fully dimension this, and I have not done that, so I will leave it up to you to come in and do some additional dimensions. But now we're going to set this up on our paper. Okay, so we've been working in our black background. That is our model space. Again, one of the benefits to our template files is there are paper space layouts of various sizes. And in this case, we're going to look at an A-size piece of paper. On these title page layouts, we have a couple of things. We have a red line, which should be on the border line. Okay, that should be on our border line. We have the title block, which is on the bottom. Again, that should be on our border line. We have some text, which I'll show you here in a second. That should be on a text layer, but it's part of what they call a block. See how the text is highlighted with the border lines in the title block? And then we have what's called a viewport or a viewport line. And this is kind of like a magic window line. This allows us to go from zooming in and out of the paper and then repositioning our drawing. Okay. So a couple of things. When I'm zooming in and out, sometimes people zoom in way too far and then they double left click, and then wait a second, what just happened? Here's my drawing, but where'd my paper go? So people get themselves into trouble, and the easy way out of that is down here at the bottom where it says model. You see model or paper space pops up. And if you get zoomed in too far, if you just click on that, it'll take you back into what's known as paper space where you can zoom out looking at the paper. So what we did by mistake is we went and toggled this paper to model. And you can see when I do that, that green viewport layer gets nice and bold and thick. And that's effectively telling you you're looking through like a camera lens where I can zoom and move things around and decide how to almost frame like my photograph. I'm taking a photograph of my drawing. All right. So item number one is we want to make sure we kind of get our paper big enough that we can see into it. Okay. Number two, we don't want to be too far that we can't see the border. Then we're going to double left click or hit the tab, double left click inside that green rectangle, and that makes my viewport active. Now, I think I mentioned earlier, but a double left click on our mouse wheel will do what they call a zoom extents. It will zoom in and center whatever you have. If you have just this drawing, it'll be great. But if this is like really, really super small and I can't see it, and like way up here in the corner, I've got a minuscule speck or a circle that I wasn't paying attention when I was doing. When I double click, it will not do this for you and you will be unhappy. Okay. So again, proper drawing technique, paying attention to what you're doing is kind of important. The next thing is I want to pay attention to scale. Okay, you'll see down here in our title block it says scale. I want to pay attention to the size that I am printing this. So if someone has an architectural scale or a ruler, they can measure something that maybe I forgot to measure, or maybe in their manufacturing processes they need to know a size that I didn't provide. And for this particular object, this should fit on our piece of paper with no problem at 1:1 scale. So it will be printed at full size. Okay, and you can see when I did that, it changed the size of the object, and it now says 1:1 down here. What's important is that I might need to pan this side to side, but if I did what I just did there and I zoomed by accident, the scale will change at the same time. So it's kind of a good habit to get into. Get it scaled, and then maybe just do, again, a visual centering location on our paper, and then turn off that viewport. So again, it won't change its size. Again, I haven't talked about it before, but if I come back into model space, and let's say I add a quick dimension over here, right? If I add that dimension real quick, it should automatically update and add that dimension, because again, it's like a camera, it's looking through and seeing things. All right, so viewport, zooming, scaling, and last but not least, we have filling out our title block. And again, that's made pretty easy for you. All you need to do is come down here onto the blue text and double left click. And that should bring up text that all you have to do is fill it in. Okay, so if we open this up, you'll see that there are some prompts. So what drawing number is this? In our classes, we tend to move in order. So maybe this is drawing 1. Okay, and you can see there it filled it in automatically for me. Next one, what's the scale? Well, this was either full scale or better yet, 1:1, or even better, 1 inch equal to 1 inch. Okay, I think I put a foot mark there. 1 inch equal 1 inch. Today's date, well, you would obviously put in today's date. Today is 1/20/21. New president today. What is the drawing name? Well, this was the key plate. Again, preferably all uppercase. And what is your name? And again, hopefully your whole name will fit here. If your whole name doesn't fit, maybe an abbreviation of your first name, but probably your full last name. And if I say okay, we will have a drawing ready to print. So thank you for watching. We will talk about how to print in class, depending on the application. Hope you enjoyed the video and it was helpful. Thank you much. See you next time.